Let's move on to dun 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 Abortgate 2023. Mover
Oh,
ruins
dude.
Twitter. So here's the backstory before I'll show you here. Over the weekend, right? In fact, in your hometown, our home area, NASCAR trucks and ARCA went to Mid Ohio, right? Have you ever been up to that track? You know where I'm talking about, Mid Ohio
I have
track?
been to Mid Ohio. Yeah. I mean, I
Yeah.
haven't been on the track, but I know where it is. I've been up there.
Well, I follow it because obviously I enjoy racing and I've got a connection to ARCA because I did the test and I'm still trying to get sponsors and I keep up. And one of the people that I keep up with is Frankie Muniz. You may know him from Malcolm in the Middle. He's started his ARCA career this year.
Yep.
And I follow him because I saw him at the test. I'm keeping up because he's he's bringing good attention to the sport. I think it's awesome that he's trying to move up. I think ARCA is really benefiting from his presence, and so I keep up with him. I follow him on Twitter. And over the weekend after the race, he did really well. By the way, he had I think he was fifth or sixth after not qualifying all that great. So good for him. He made a tweet and I responded, and I probably should have been a little bit nicer, but the tweet said, but it happened to be in my wheelhouse, not just race cars, but something I'm familiar with. And it said, after sitting on the plane in Philadelphia for 3.5 hours, we were literally taking off and aborted because crew would be overtime by 1 minute, pilot said. Now flight is canceled, but still on plane because no gates. Really want to see my wife and son, and any tags American Airlines. So I, with my lack of tact, and I wasn't even attacking him, I was just basically saying, if this is the answer you got, this is wrong. I said, there's 0% chance anyone aborted to take off because they timed out, because you and I both know not going to happen. And we'll talk about why in a second. However, I did not realize what kind of storm this would cause. A lot of angry people came after me, actually. So there was, hold on, let me get rid of this. One response was, I have a daughter who's a flight attendant for a major airline. There's 100% chance this happened. So, okay, cool. And then we got to Darnell, who said, Blue Check Boy is not a commercial pilot. That's me. He sounds like he has issues and decided to attack a successful celebrity. You'll notice at no point in this that I say anything about Frankie. It was more of a commentary on the fact of things that did not happen. And then we got the breakdown. Cedar Post says, regardless of what CW Moines says, that's what happened. AA 2858 Philadelphia to Phoenix was cleared to the active, rolled across the numbers, and then aborted the takeoff and returned to the gate. Seems an apology is owed by American and Captain Know-It-All, and he even had the decency of showing the flight radar track, which you can actually see in real time. And then he doubled down and he said, aborted takeoff. That's what happened. They were halfway down the runway and changed their minds. That's an abort. At what point or speed is moot? Frankie is owed an apology, which it's too bad, by the way, Wombat couldn't make it because he actually chimed in on this and he said something pretty funny. So we looked at the data because flight radar, why not, right? So we looked at when they went down the runway, because you can tie all this, and the fastest they got was 30 knots the entire time they were on the runway. And Wombat came back and said, if the fastest they got was 30 knots halfway down the runway, you should thank your pilot for aborting, because that plane was never going to fly.
Right.
That was never going to happen. So if you look at this, they push back, they taxi, they use the runway to go to the holding area. They sit there for a little over an hour. Then they turn around and they go back the other way and make a right on left on the runway, right on November. Then they go to the spot. You can even go to the audio if you really want to do this. So what this brought up to me is not, well, I want to be in a Twitter war, because I don't. But the reason I said there's 0% chance is because airline pilots, we're professionals, right? We take this seriously. You're an airline pilot. In fact, that may be why we didn't have a show last night. And I'll get to, because you actually talked about why you wanted to talk about this too. But the reason this was a problem for me and why I said there's 0% chance is because he said they literally were taking off. And then the pilot said, nope, 1 minute over, we're going to abort. There's a thing called the maximum off time, mandatory off time, whatever. There's a time on your flight release. I'm sure every airline does it the same way, where it tells you what time you, no kidding, have to be off, because per FAR 117 and per contracts and everything else, pilots have crew duty days. We have the maximum amount of time we can, from either if you're on reserve, how much time you can be on duty from the time you went on call to your last assignment, or if you're just flying, how many hours, augmented, unaugmented, window of circadian low, all this stuff. So we have a time, and that time is based on you take off by this time, you have this much time in the air, you land, you're not going to bust a FAR 117. And so there is a time, and if we reach that time, we're getting close to it, we're going to say, nope, we're going right back to the gate. We don't want to bust FAR 117, or we're fatigued, or whatever. But there is no professional pilot on this planet. Well, in the United States, I'm not going to say on this planet because I've seen some weird things in some other countries. There's no professional pilot that is going to take the runway, be cleared for takeoff, and then go, you know what? That's a minute right there. Idle boards, 80 knots, check. And we're high speed aboard. Okay, now we got to get the brakes cooled. And, sorry, fellas, but when I did my 80 knot check, the timer ran out. Because that MOT is based off of either line up and wait or cleared for takeoff. If you hit either of those, the time doesn't matter anymore. Gonky, what do you got?
Yeah. So takeoff is probably like the most dangerous part of the flight. And it's kind of like like all the safety rules and regs is like, it starts with like the intent to take off, right? So like if you initiate a takeoff, which is you're clear for takeoff, you take the runway and you get the thrust set or throttles or whatever it is, and you start rolling, then it is it's a big deal if you have to stop.
Yes.
Not only
doesn't matter what your speed. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It could be 15 knots, and guess what? That's paperwork. And you didn't mention it, but pilots are super lazy. We don't want to do paperwork.
But if you go back to the track, I can debunk this just by the track, right? So the fact that they took the runway and turned right and then held for an hour, that's not abort anyway. If you aborted, you're going back to the gate.
Yeah.
You're done. You're either re-entering the Congo line after you figure whatever it is out, door closed, door open, whatever, but you're not going to go hold for an hour. They were holding for an hour. And then I think the reason it's good to talk about this because I think the general public doesn't understand. Philadelphia this weekend got crushed by weather. That's not the airline's fault. You can blame the airline for maintenance, crews timing out during a normal day or whatever. But when you have thunderstorms, either in the departure or arrival corridor or over the field, it cascades, especially at an airport like Philadelphia. That's bad on a good day. Even on a good day, Philadelphia can be a dumpster fire.
Mover, correct me if I'm wrong, but 30 knots could be just a really fast taxi.
That's what it is. No, it's absolutely a fast taxi. I asked my friend, the Airbus, the FOM for them it's 30 knots. So
that's what I thought.
This is more or less. This was, I'm sure the tower said no delay. They go because they're using the runway as a taxiway. This was not an attempt to take off. This was a, hey, use the runway, go in what we call the penalty box, the penalty container or whatever, because you got to hold because you don't have an expected off time because of ATC delays, thunderstorms in the corridor, all the stuff that's going on that you as a passenger don't know. And I want to be very clear. This is not an attack on Frankie. I know some people even accuse me of using this to try to poach his followers, which is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. But this is not an attack. This is education. The general public, I bet you if you polled all of the 169 passengers on that aircraft, 10 of them would think that they took off and landed. 40 of them would think that, we high speed aborted. Some of them would think I understand that they don't do this job, but that's why we're here. That's why we come out and say, as a professional pilot, I'm telling you, a professional would not abort for being 1 minute over. It's because they hit their crew day while they were sitting there waiting.
Well, also, Mover, I mean, you touched on it, but if you actually did something like that, you'd probably get fired.
1,000%. Yeah, that's unprofessional.
Yeah, if you didn't get fired, you get violated by the FAA because the tower's going to, the tower's always, I say, you need assistance, you roll the truck, say reason, whatever. Yep. So, that affects the Congo line behind you. I mean, it's like it is the best place to time out is sitting at the gate at your home base.
Yeah. Well, and I understand air travel is not pleasant, especially when the weather's bad, but that's part of it, man. I mean, you're
Yeah.
flying from Ohio to Philadelphia to Phoenix. You're going to have delays. I mean, it's unforeseen. This isn't stuff that, tweeting at American Airlines or Delta Airlines or whatever is not going to fix your situation, because they don't want the crews to time out because it costs them money. And when we say overtime, it's not we have to pay them extra money. It's because the crew timed out. There's no overtime pay unless you're talking premium, but that's a fresh crew. There's no, hey, we went 1 minute over, we got paid overtime. There is, we went over, we got to go back to the hotel.
Yeah,
This flight just got canceled.
it's a physiological safety
Yeah.
rule or reg.
It's fatigue.
Yep.
Yeah. So anyway, enough on that. I thought it was a good learning point, because I think we don't talk about a lot of airline stuff in general, but it is funny just, how emotional people get, when it's, hey, it's my favorite celebrity. And it's like, this could have been Joe Blow off the street. I would have said the same thing, because the truth matters. And I don't like the idea of the public going, well, these pilots are so unprofessional that they were literally taking off, risked everybody on the plane just because they didn't want to be a minute over. That's just not what
There's no
airline pilots
chance.
do.
No chance.